it's a really tough world out there at the moment. There's lots going on externally, which exacerbates internal pressures. And I think the more that we can start to break down those barriers and have those conversations as part of normal conversations, the better.
You can be your biggest ally, but also your own worst enemy. And, making sure that people do understand it should be a priority for team members. I think that's the only way we can really change things.
Welcome to a brand new season of Diversifying Data. I am your host, Rakhi Sharma, and today I am so excited to be joined by two people that I'm hoping to learn a lot from in this particular episode. First is Melissa King. She is a trustee at Bromley, Lewisham and Greenwich Mind, and also a DEI specialist. And secondly, it's Roxanne Greene, who is a strategic account director here at Kubrick, my personal work wife, and mental health first aider for anyone at Kubrick who is always curious in terms of who they can reach out to for anything. So welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
The theme for this month, such a fun one, is beating the January blues, and pretty obvious why we're talking about it in the month of January. We're all back to work. It's, brand new year, new me is plastered about pretty much everywhere. What's your New Year's resolution? What are you going to achieve? It's an immediate rush of feeling like you need to have your life together. And I'm pretty sure this affects not only people within the data industry, but people in general. So the aim of today is to just give people out there a really nice way of phrasing things differently or framing things differently in their head when it comes to, January blues or getting back to work or whatever kind of anxieties they have around that. So we were just talking about what Blue Monday is, which is, deemed the saddest day of the year, and everyone has that to look forward to when they come straight back from Christmas. So this year, I don't even know if I want to say the day that it's been pinpointed as, but it is a day in January. But for people out there who aren't familiar with Blue Monday, what is it in essence, and why has it been pinpointed as such?
I think it's classed as sort of being the third Monday in January. Statistically, that's quite far away from looking forward to holidays and summertime, but also quite far into January in the sense that people are already starting to break their New Year's resolutions. Christmas feels like a distant memory. Yeah, and having to try and get back into the swing of getting up early and going to work every day. So
I mean, that's something that pretty much everyone can relate to. So yeah, I get it. Is that the same for you as well? That you class Blue Monday as that?
Yeah, I think again, I don't really like to put it on a specific day. I kind of
so depressing that there's a day for it.
I think it's more of like, I guess January blues is a bit more of a generic term for it. I think it's just that, getting back into a routine after maybe, a lot of people have time off over the festive season, so it's a big change and a big adjustment, and kind of once you're in the swing of things, maybe pre the festive period, then you're kind of used to it. You're on a roll, but actually coming back is that bit harder. So yeah, long nights, horrible weather normally.
Starts when it's dark outside. You just think this is criminal that I have to get on a train and get to work when it's like sleeping time.
Yeah.
But I think you touched on it, and it's important for us to discuss why January is a tough month in general for a lot of people, and I think the problem is that it's such a variety of different reasons, and probably an amalgamation of all of them to some degree. So the cold weather, the dark mornings, end of celebrations, where December's kind of the month where things wind down anyway. So I feel like probably shouldn't say this, but I feel like I'm on holiday for about 15th of December because no one's answering my emails. Nobody wants to talk to me from then. Inbox is great because you're just like, nope, no one's responded. And then it's the complete reversal of that come, January 3rd or wherever you go back to work. Money pressures as well from having overspent. If it's a combination of all that, it's pretty tough. I guess to both of you, are there any personal anecdotes that you can share from sort of having dealt with that on your own and also being so involved in your own organizations, and also for you being a mental health aider? What would you say to just someone saying, I'm dealing with all of this all at once?
Sort of my perspective, And maybe I try and apply this to any issues that I might be facing, is trying to like break it down as well. I think, we're talking about Christmas and festive periods with almost an assumption that it's positive, and for lots of people it's not, and we're facing into some really serious issues coming into the new year, and you never know what someone else is going through, right? So I think being able to kind of, just be on that journey with somebody to make sure they're able to break down any issues they are facing, and kind of just make them feel like they're not alone. I think that's really important. Alongside that, when I was actually doing the mental health first aid training, we were talking a little bit about the campaign "It's Okay Not to Be Okay." That was quite an interesting concept, because actually the lady who was training us said, actually, I don't agree with that. It's actually not okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to be alone. And so I try and really kind of think about that when, if people are coming to me for support in mental health first aid, and just kind of being a signposter rather than, any form of counselling or anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Melissa, from your perspective as well, if someone, I guess, because you're, you've got such a wide remit at mind as well for dealing with different boroughs, not even just a company or a small subsector of people. If someone comes to you with that huge amount of tick list of everything that they're worried about and building up to in the new year, is there anything that you would off the bat recommend to them?
I mean, I think when people come for advice around mental health, I think there's an immediate pressure that you need to know the answers and you need to be able to make that person better. And I think that's why, partly why there's still so much stigma about talking about mental health, because there's this fear that if you don't know the answers, you're not going to be able to help people. And particularly when I look at the work I do with Bromley, Lewisham and Greenwich Mind, there's three such diverse boroughs, and mental health culturally is dealt with very differently in different cultures. Many different things play into what works for different people to manage their own mental health. So I think for me the key thing is about listening without judgment, and just being really open. I think sometimes if someone's talking to you about mental health issue and you're immediately relaying it back to something that you've experienced and said, oh, when I was going through something like this, or, you as a human, I think it's part of us having conversation to try and relate to what someone's telling you and be able to have that rapport and almost play it back in your own terms. But actually, I think it's okay in these situations just to listen. That person doesn't necessarily want you to have all the answers. They just want to feel heard. And I think sometimes it can be really distracting if that person is just coming back with lots and lots of advice. So for me, it's just about making sure that you're giving them the time, the space to kind of offload, talk to you about what's going on, and really just be able to play it back to them, tell them what you've heard, ask them more questions, because often people have the answers within themselves around how they can help themselves, but it just can feel incredibly overwhelming with lots going on. So yeah, I think for me it's listening without judgment.
So important. And I think because with all the build up of these issues and coming into a brand new year and feeling this sort of almost invigorated need to prove a point that you are going to do better this year, you're going to turn over a new leaf, be a new person, do all of this, it's a lot of pressure, mentally, financially. You're going to get your finances sorted and that's going to happen immediately. When we're talking about work specifically, we've throughout the podcast, I think we've spoken quite a lot about people seem to have two different personas. Your work, you don't bring anything to work, you do your work and you go home. But work is such a huge part of our lives. And I am I talk to everyone. I have my people at work and I just get everything out there. But it's tough for a lot of people to be able to vocalize that. How important do you think it is for people to be able to have those type of conversations within, or feel comfortable in a sense to have those conversations at work as well as outside work?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely critical. I do think that mental health is still very stigmatised. Probably on a scale, it's improved from where it was 5 years ago. It's improved from where it was 10 years ago, but it's absolutely not where it needs to be at the moment. And I think the more that we can do, so even though the concept of Blue Monday is quite depressing, what is really good is it gets us having these conversations, and it gets us talking about the factors, as you referenced, Roxy, around it's okay not to be okay, and almost helping people to feel that they're not alone at this time of year and feeling a little bit rubbish. So I think for me, organisations have an obligation to be using events like this, but also for leaders to be normalising mental health conversations on a day-to-day basis, to be sharing their own vulnerabilities. No one is immune to feeling rubbish and having mental health issues. So I think the more that we talk about it, it's a really tough world out there at the moment. There's lots going on externally which exacerbates internal pressures. And I think the more that we can start to break down those barriers and have those conversations as part of normal conversations, the better.
Yeah. And Roxanne, I guess in your capacity within Kubrick as being mental health first aider, have you noticed, like, is it around this time that you notice people in general, do they reach out to you? Do you get told about people who maybe need that extra bit of support? Like, how does it usually work within the company?
Yeah, so there's a team of mental health first aiders at Kubrick, and so the team is kind of widely advertised on boards around our office, so they know that when I say they, I mean the people who work here. Obviously, everybody knows who we are, and there is kind of a centralised way for people to approach mental health first aid if they want to just get that bit of extra support. Sometimes like you were saying, Melissa, it's just a bit of a sounding board. It's a place where you can express yourself more freely, but actually to kind of touch on your points about having that, it's essentially an extension of your network, your support network. And I think it is really important to be able to vocalise those things at work. At Kubrick, we do a lot around, trying to share those vulnerabilities. And it's interesting as well what you said earlier about fixing. In my journey with personal therapy, when I first went to therapy, I was like, I just want you to fix me because then I'll feel better and I won't have this anymore, whatever this might be. And actually, the more self-awareness you develop, like there's always going to be less desirable or more difficult things that come in your life and bring out different sides of you. But actually just having that safe space to share it with people that you trust and feeling like you can be your authentic self at work. It's a bit of a cliche, but the closer you can be to who you are in all environments, everywhere you are, I think that helps kind of break some of those walls down.
No, completely agree. And I don't disagree at all that we are quite far away from it, because there are certain people, whether it's people who are in top positions or, they it's like we don't have time rather than anything. It's not that they always don't care or they don't want to have these conversations. They're just so busy, but it doesn't create that environment all the time where people feel completely free to have those conversations, because there are deadlines to meet, there are pressures, there are team objectives, there's all of these things. So it does push these conversations further back down the priority list. And I think that when we make these sorts of conversations part of the priority list, then it doesn't become like, oh, it's it's just a sad day. It's a sad day in a sad month. It's actually like, let's change the narrative and shift it around a little bit and just have normal conversations. It doesn't have to be a super deep one, but just to be able to get some of that frustration out maybe is quite positive. Sorry, you were saying.
I think it is just the normalisation of it, I think. And actually, it's all well and good not having time. Busy becomes a currency for importance, and it's not always reflective.
Oh my God, I'm getting down a place. That's amazing.
But if you don't make time for this, it will bite you in the bum later, for want of a better expression. It comes back to haunt you. You can be your biggest ally, but also your own worst enemy. So, by actually making the time and carving out of your day, and making sure that people do understand it should be a priority for team members. I think that's the only way we can really change things.
Yeah,
so
agreed. Well, I want to move on to a thing that I have a lot of opinions on is New Year's resolutions. I think it's something that people tend to just religiously do it because it's so part of our culture, and it's just like it's a fun campaign that people do every year. New year, new me. I'm gonna lose 10 pounds. I'm gonna put this amount of money into savings. But it's what strikes me is the immediacy of it, because it's not usually structured over a period of a year or forward looking 6 months. It's like, come January 1st, this has to change, and now. So what do you think of New Year's resolutions in a more general sense, and how do you think that maybe they could be framed differently to help people have less of a pressurized journey with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think New Year's resolutions, I tend not to make them anymore just because I think for some of the reasons that you've just described, they tend to be big, all encompassing changes, that we expect a whole facet of our personality or a lifestyle to miraculously suddenly change on January 1st. And actually, then it becomes quite quickly you realise that you've set yourself up to fail. It becomes unrealistic, and then you spend, a couple of weeks beating yourself up about the fact that you weren't even able to stick to something, and it's only middle of January and it's all fallen flat on its face.
Yeah.
So I think I do like January as a period of setting out what I'd like to achieve throughout the coming year. But I think I do it in a way that's much kinder to myself now these days. Focusing on what's going to be realistic to maintain across the year. Ease myself into January for a couple of weeks because it's inevitably really tough, isn't it, this time of year? So I think we all need to be really kind to ourselves.
Agreed. I mean, honestly, dry January every year I try it. It's the 1 month where I need a glass of wine after work sometimes, and I don't want to feel, that pressure of it's just January and I've got to make up for all the gluttony and all of this. And it's really, for me, it seems stupid to think that any toxic situation or whatever bad behaviors or whatever it was in December just magically go away with the start of a new year. It's that thing that really bugs me around New Year's resolutions of I'm never going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to do that again. It's like, well, you haven't had a personality transplant over Christmas, so I don't. It's that whole thing. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I really like what Melissa said about kindness, like being kind to yourself, kind of being gentle with yourself. Quite often, we're almost kind of a bit shell shocked from coming back to work, or getting back into any sort of routines. I think there's also a kind of, it's very individual, right? Because some people thrive off that feeling of, okay, it's a brand new year. I've done self-reflection. I can reassess. I'd like to have that more focused view. And for some people, saying I'm going to make a massive change really works, and it's motivating for them. I think where these things fall down is, if it's from a place of kind of maybe self-hatred is slightly strong, but dislike or perception of lack, you can't hate yourself into change. So I think it's just kind of being mindful of that when you set out. And also, like, it's very cliche as well. I'm full of it today. But
I love the sayings.
It's there's always a new start every day, every hour, every minute. If you want, you can start something new and start to make those small changes that are going to go towards achieving something you want or changing something that you think is less optimal about yourself or your situation. So
no, I think I really agree with that. I mean, in terms of at work, when you're saying if people have a New Year's resolution in regards to work and things aren't happening quick enough, I do think that work related stress is one of those things that you genuinely, for a lot of reasons, financially included, people need to make money. Sometimes they feel pressured in a job role, or they feel, work in and of itself is the difficult thing to come back to in January, rather than, we've talked about all of the other things that contribute towards it, say cold weather and all of that. What advice would you give to people who are struggling at work and work is the main thing that is getting them stressed out in January, rather than all of the other factors that come with it?
I mean, I guess for me, and I suppose we're kind of, if we're working on the assumption that there's nothing horrendously wrong in the situation that you're in, you're just stressed about coming back, because that's a different conversation. But I think it's using those networks, speaking to people in general, understanding the expectation, you sharing your kind of concerns, like desires, your goals, etc., and kind of socializing that a bit more widely. I think, some people who, I'm not saying it's necessarily very successful people or whatever, but you can go a bit inner. You try and do everything yourself, and actually, we've got, hopefully everyone has got good communities around them in work that want to see people succeed. So I would say if that is kind of the main stressor for you, then find those networks, as we spoke about earlier, to get that out first of all, but then also take some pragmatic steps around, okay, what can I do to minimize this for myself, and reach out and see where everyone else is at, because you're probably not alone in how you're feeling.
Agreed. Yeah, intention without action is not always the way that you can get over anything. So I think that's really key. Melissa, I'm sure you've in your capacity, have heard lots of people come to you say, I'm stressed about going back in January, like I've got XYZ to do. Do you ever offer sort of constructive advice on how to plan for that, or in any sense like that?
Yeah, I guess being really aware of your own triggers. I think we have so much choice now in work as well. We talk about one of the good things coming out of the pandemic is the ability to work in a more of a hybrid way. And I think for people in the mental health community, it has been incredibly empowering, that they don't have to always go into the office, and some people feel much better set up to be able to manage their own emotions when they're at home. But equally, I think being at home sometimes can be quite triggering as well. It can be quite isolating because you're not able to interact with other people. You're not able to, use those natural points where you'd perhaps pop across to another colleague's desk and have a little chat. So I think being really aware of what works for your own situation and where you get your energy from. Do you get your energy from being at home and being able to be familiar in your own surroundings, or do you actually get comfort from being able to talk to others, and actually trying to work in a hybrid way that actually benefits your mental health in that respect? But I also think, don't leave it too late before you talk to someone. I think sometimes the thought of speaking to your manager about the fact that, you're not particularly happy at the moment, you feel a bit low, when actually you feel like maybe it hasn't got to that point yet, or, it's too early to be raising it. I think the earlier you can speak to people, the better, because otherwise sometimes it gets to a point where you then raise it and it's a really big issue, when actually I think if you just allowed yourself to have some of those open conversations at an earlier stage before things had gone too badly wrong, then I think, sometimes we're often quite pleasantly surprised at the reaction that we get and the support that's actually there. I think because we don't talk about it all the time, we assume that people are going to judge us. And then when you have the courage to have that conversation, you're really pleasantly surprised at how people rally around you and support you.
That's very true. I've always been, I've never been negatively surprised by me reaching out to someone, which is key. I don't think there's been one time where I've asked for help and I haven't received it. It's just having the courage to do that, because I was thinking about this actually. Roxanne and I have very client-facing roles, so we do talk to people a lot, but especially within the data industry, just thinking about consultants even who are behind a screen working on several different screens all day, and I've had the feedback from quite a few that not for their managers being disconnected or rude or anything, but just they have no need to speak to anyone all day, and that can be quite triggering, especially in a month like January where you've had such a social month in December and then suddenly all quiet. So is it about it's about proactively, I guess, setting up time for yourself and other people and not feeling like you're bothering them?
But I also think, as kind of Melissa was saying, it's just learning what works for you best, right? So of course at Kubrick, when our consultants are on site, they're still always welcome to come into the office because we kind of recognise that. And quite often if you're going into the working world for the first time, you don't know. I mean, maybe we're all old enough to say that we worked in an office 5 days a week for a long period, and it's I've gained like a lot of different skills, and I've met a lot of friends, and my social circle for a long time was around that, and actually not having that experience and feeling reticent. You might have finished your degree or started it even, or whatever education you're undertaking online, and not been in that environment. So I think it's all about exploring those different environments and learning, exactly as you said, what energizes you, but also recognizing that that there might be a bit of discomfort, but the gain will be so much greater. And again, just speaking about other people's experiences and how they've utilized it. When I'm sat at home, if I'm in a miserable mood, then there's no one there to change my kind of state. But actually, when I come to the office, even if I'm not feeling great, I know I'm going to have some good conversations, going to be some friendly faces here. I'll have a laugh. And then even if I'm just pretending that I feel better, by the end I'm like, oh, actually maybe I do. So it kind of works. Fake till you make.
There, even if you are an introvert, I do think there is really something to human interaction, and sometimes I do, like, again, not just singling out the data sector, but I do see people who are just working behind screens all day. It's their skill sets, they're very good at the job, it's amazing, but real feeling that worth and like you're part of a connection with someone genuinely just does come from having that interaction. So even if you're shy or whatever, whatever it might be, to reach out, I think, as we've all said, we've never really had a negative experience from reaching out and just saying, hey, have you got 5 minutes for a quick chat, just so I can get some human interaction in a day. And I think that's quite key. So actually, just for anyone listening from Kubrick, I wanted to maybe touch on, maybe they don't know what a mental health aider does, or even people listening from outside and wanted to reach out. What does a mental health aider do, and what would you offer, and how would the process of reaching out work, in case someone doesn't know?
So mental health first aid is essentially kind of a first step of accessing support for people who, feel like maybe there's something bothering them, they want to explore it, and really mental health first aid is kind of a first line defence against something that could turn into something a bit more serious. So, but that's not to say that anybody who's going through anything, or maybe just wants a safe space to get something off their chest or discuss it, can't reach out. But that's kind of the breadth of what we do. And yeah, really a mental health first aid role, be very clear, it's not a counselling role, it's not about that. It's our role to listen, to obviously with people's permission, without breaking confidentiality, to flag things that may be of concern, and also signpost on to other services or other places that might be really beneficial for that person to access. So yeah, and in terms of reaching out, as I mentioned, there is kind of my face alongside other faces plastered across our office. So they, the team and the wider Kubrick community know who we are, and so they can reach us at any time. And there's quite a lot of diversity in that team as well, which is really important. We want people to be able to see somebody they can relate to have that option of speaking to someone who they feel they can resonate with on whatever level they need to.
Amazing. And do you want to just allude to some of the work that you've done? Obviously, you don't have to go too deep into it if you don't want to, but it would be great for people to understand, especially from the DEI specialist perspective, what that means and some of the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think recognising, I suppose, that, we're probably sort of just getting into the tip of the iceberg around how you can best support people from a mental health perspective. There's so many different ways, so many different things from a proactive perspective, from looking after your wellness and supporting yourself, without even recognising that, different cultures and different communities look on mental health in very, very different ways, and I think one of the big things I've learnt working with Bromley, Lewisham and Greenwich Mind is just the importance of being able to tap into that. So we try to run some very specific culturally diverse services to recognise that, if you're from a Black community, perhaps for an Afro-Caribbean community, the way that you traditionally would talk about mental health is probably very different to myself as sort of a mixed ethnicity person with heritage in sort of Southeast Asia. So I think it's recognising that there's lots of different layers and facets which make us all human and make us interact in different ways, but not just assuming that everyone will have the same life experience and therefore will respond to the same ways of dealing with things.
Right, of course. And I think that's that skill set that you both have in order to kind of not put your own opinion into it and just to be a listening ear is something that not everyone has the capabilities of doing it, and it's a learned skill as well. So you've done training, as you've alluded to. I'm sure you've done a great deal of training around that. For anyone who also wants to be a support for someone, if we're flipping it around and they just want to get more involved with maybe helping out, what sort of steps or training or anything would you recommend to be able to really do this in the right way?
So I think there's lots of different ways to get involved. My reasons for getting involved, I had my own personal loss. I lost my younger brother suddenly 5 years ago, and I wanted to channel the energy that I had into something positive and make a positive difference. So I decided that Mind would be a good place for me to use my skills. And so, I joined as a trustee, but there's so many different ways to volunteer, whether that is as a trustee, there's so many different organisations out there that all really welcome help and support, particularly in the cost of living crises at the moment. I think, and it's not all altruistic. I think, I definitely get something really positive from doing it as well. I think our ability as a human to help another human makes us feel good about ourselves as well. So, I think just think about what you're really passionate about, where you feel you can make a difference, the skill set that you'd have to offer, and then just have a look online, because there's tons and tons of opportunities out there.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think obviously from a Kubrick perspective, and I guess people in the wider working world, obviously mental health first aid is a great place to start. The training materials and the training that I went through was really, really great. And yeah, I guess as Melissa said, kind of exploring a bit for yourself, like, are there opportunities that you feel passionately about? Because when something resonates with you, it is very infectious. And yeah, for me, personally, like I kind of shared before, my experience with personal therapy kind of really led me into thinking, I want to find out more about this. So I looked at some kind of skills training around kind of listening and kind of therapeutic style things to kind of have a bit of an explore and understand what that really meant. And then I kind of did the mental health first aid here, and yeah, really, it is, it does make you feel good, as well as kind of giving back and hopefully being that kind of helpful listening ear, non-judgmentally for others.
Just, I guess, to round off, we've had some amazing insight. I told you what I wanted to do was learn from both of you, and I've learned a lot in the last 45 minutes. So to finish off, I've got an article from Signet Healthcare, and they've got a specific article which came out very, very recently on how to beat the January blues, and giving 10 top tips. So just sort of bite-sized chunks of things that people can take and do, and it's very action-oriented to try and beat them. I was thinking I could just sort of round off the top 10 tips and then maybe see if any of them match up with your personal ones, and see, if not, what your personal top 3 tips would be. So to kick off, tip 1, understand that it's normal. Biological reasons why many people feel low, and just understand, not beating yourself up, being kind to yourself, as you mentioned. Tip 2, get as much daylight as possible. We are in England and it's not the sunniest of places, but that's the second tip. Tip 3, keep fit and stay active. So maintaining even a walk at lunchtime, they're saying, is gentle exercise, not forcing any huge amounts of cardio, because then that's aligns with gotta lose the weight quickly. Tip 4, avoid unrealistic New Year's resolutions. Tip 5, eat properly. Tip 6, we haven't talked about this, but actually sleeping well is another one they've said. Tip 7, learn a new skill. Tip 8, get help for financial pressure. Tip 9 is interesting. Use positive daily affirmations. So I don't know if either of you do that. And tip 10, be grateful for what has happened. So focusing on the positive things taking place around you, no matter how small. So those are the 10, I guess, steps in which they said it does create some sort of positive energy and flow within you. Would any of your own personal tips align with that, or are any of them significantly different?
Yeah, no, I think some great tips in there. I think the one about sort of gratitude is important. I think sometimes it can feel a bit cheesy to to keep a gratitude diary, but I do think we're quick always to beat ourselves up about the things that go wrong, and actually, if we were, proper cheerleaders for ourselves, we'd probably spend more time looking at what's actually gone right and celebrating the wins. I think we're quick to gloss over what's gone well and actually focus on where we want to beat ourselves up because we did something wrong or we failed at our resolutions, and rather than looking at it a bit more holistically and being a bit more of a friend to ourselves. So I think that's an interesting one, but you've got to do it in a way that feels authentic to you, because otherwise, if you're constantly trying to look for the positives and write them down, if it's just not you, it's not going to feel right. But yeah, I think the balance is important. We all want to do more exercise. We all want to eat more healthily. And I think when you can do it, but equally don't beat yourself up if it doesn't always go to plan. Just wake up and, as you said, reset. We get lots of new moments every day. So yeah, just go for it again.
I think photophile is the right word. I love light. I know that sounds like whatever film that's from. Love lamp.
That's definitely from something. I don't know where it's from, but it is.
Yeah. But when I get my first kind of really strong January blues feeling, I am on timeanddate.com. This isn't sponsored. And I will look at when it will be light, when I have to get up, and when I will finish work. And I put it in my calendar. And so for me, this year is the 24th of February. So I'm like, okay, that's not that far.
No, that's so interesting. Could you just say the website? What's it called?
Timeanddate.com.
Timeanddate.com.
Sunrise and sunset times.
Great.
I know, like, that just works for me because I love it when it's light, and it's light when I get up, even if it's, you know, a minute after and when I officially should finish work.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the diet and exercise one is always very interesting. There's lots of societal pressure around this time to make those big changes and maybe internalizing that. But I think nourishment, whatever that means for you, you know, like whether that is eating properly, maybe it's a walk, maybe it's, you know, that self-care or whatever that looks like for you. I think being gentle and kind of nourishing yourself with what you need and being in tune with yourself as much as possible around what those things are. I really liked some of those tips. I guess, the gratitude one, it's something that I have struggled with historically, I think. I think it can feel, depending on maybe your background, your culture as well, it can feel a bit cringy or a bit inauthentic. But I have tried to incorporate that a bit more. And I think it's just that slight framing of the positive more, you know, moving towards things that kind of make you feel good as much as is possible. And something else that I try and do is, I'm not very good at keeping affirmations, but I do try and say positive things to other people that I know or care about, or I think are doing well, or I think look great, or, you know, whatever. I think trying to put a bit more positive stuff out into the world kind of changes my mind a little bit anyway. So
those are really, really good additions. I'm going to throw one into the mix because I do this a lot. I am probably the most self-deprecating person ever. Anyone gives me a compliment, it's like I just bat it off, or I say something funny back. Wit is my go-to thing, and it's my defense mechanism. Anyone says anything nice to me, I'm just like, oh, don't be stupid. Like, you know, it's a reflex thing. But somewhere along the line, you begin to internalize those things. So I think accepting nice things that other people say to you actually helps you, because if you accept it, it's just a nice thing to hear from people that someone else is viewing you. You may think that you know, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. January's come around, you still got all of these things that you want to, you know, I'm not like this, I'm not like that. But then if someone else, and people, like you said, often do, you've made a concerted effort to do that. People do. People are nice inherently, but you've also got to learn to accept that and not bat that away the entire time. So I have tried recently to accept, you know, compliments and things like that, and not just be so harsh about myself. And even if it's in a funny, self-deprecating way, you do tend to internalize it at some point. So I don't know if anyone's defense mechanism is wit like me, but it has helped, because then you start to, you know, be a bit kinder to yourself and say, oh, okay, this person said I'm, you know, nice today, or whatever it is, and I don't have to, you know, it's not being conceited or this, that, the other if I accept it and don't make a joke about it or make light of the situation and just say, that's very nice, thank you. So yeah, that's a tip that has actually worked quite well for me, but that's because I'm a very specific type of personality. So if anyone resonates with that, then try it. It might work for you.
I think it's that internal voice. I think really checking that. That's not just a New Year's thing, but I think
yes, exactly.
The more cognizant you are of that voice and whose that voice is it you?
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know, it's quite an interesting concept. But just on those like little interactions, I was having a conversation the other day about how valuable they actually are, like a small connection with a stranger. And I think this goes back into what we were saying earlier about being in an office. You know, you can have that kind of human to human connection, even just catching someone in the kitchen, someone that you don't know, someone who it works in a coffee shop or at the checkout or whatever. And actually those things can be really invigorating, you know, and putting, you know, it's maybe karmic or whatever, but
Yeah.
actually, you know, Rakhi, if you gave out some more of those compliments to people, maybe you'd find it easier to take them back,
but
right?
do you know what's so funny is that I genuinely, I'm very, very complimentary to other people. I just cannot accept. It's weird the way it's wired, and I always put it down to sort of British culture, and we're in work, and this is just, you know, it's professional, so we just go, nope, not interested. But it's nice if you can give out a compliment, you should also be able to take one. And when you're in the January blues and you're down in the dumps and everything is rubbish and work's going crap and your love life's awful and everything's just gone to,
we're in a therapy session now.
I know. It's not me personally, just saying, just speaking for a friend. But no, it's important to just do things that work well for you, like you both have said. And I think that's a learning discovery, but I think everyone seems to go through some version of the January blues, so hopefully something within this conversation has sparked an idea to change just a little something, not in a New Year's resolution way, because, as you know, we've said, it's not necessary, but little things that bring you joy in a month that is predominantly clouded with not so great stuff. We hope that you've taken that from this conversation. So thank you both for joining. I actually feel really positive. I thought I'd come out of this feeling really, I'm not gonna lie to you, I thought I'd come out feeling totally different, but I feel very uplifted, and I think hopefully people who are listening feel the same way. But any last thoughts? Or
it's incremental gains. It's tiny things can really change your outlook and change your life over time. That sounds a bit dramatic. It wasn't meant to, but like,
we're all about the drama on the podcast.
1%, baby. That's all you need.
That's it.
But yeah, just small changes in a kind way. I've seen good effects from that. So yeah.
And I think, like we said earlier, you know, it is quite tough out there at the moment. You know, I think COVID, sort of in this post-COVID world, things, you know, we know differences have been exacerbated, and challenges for underrepresented groups and for young people have been really increased. And so I think, you know, recognising that it is tough out there, and to be kind to yourself, and, you know, talk to people and continue to break down the stigma.
Definitely. Love it. All right. Thank you both so much for being on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you all for listening to this first 2023 episode of Diversifying Data. I've been your host, Rakhi Sharma, and looking forward to, not speaking to you all, but recording the next podcast for you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.